Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Apostole, and to the organizers for giving me this opportunity to share my experiences and my thoughts about criminal prosecution in the United States. To be absolutely clear, there is no P&I cover for any criminal fines or anything related to criminal prosecution. But I believe I can say this, not just on behalf of the American club, but I believe on behalf of all of the clubs represented, that our interest collectively is to ensure that our members and the operators know what they might be faced with and be prepared when you're coming to the United States. I think that's the key. So everybody, I'm sure, has heard for years and years and years about the criminalization of the bypassing of oily water separators. But at the end of the day, it's not just that gets people in trouble in the United States. It's all about what we do, and when I say we, I'm talking about our crews, what they do with the documents that they have on board the vessel and how they act and interact with the United States Coast Guard. I'm only using this oily water separator as the first example because that's what we have all been seeing as of late. However, there are new problems lurking right around the corner. Just the other day, I read about another case where there was an owner who was found guilty when it came to air emissions. And the air emissions, when they were switching from sulfur to use other fuel, the key there was, again, the fudging of the books when the Coast Guard went on board. So it's not just all about the oily water separator, okay? We might be facing the same problems with ballast water and how we treat it within the written documentation on board the vessels and within the companies. And that's what brings me to the oil record book. As you all know, the whole point of bypassing, if you're going to bypass the oily water separator, you have to find a way to excuse where did that quantity go. So typically what will happen is entries in the oil record book are falsified or they're incorrect or not accurate, to use a better term. And ladies and gentlemen, I was very pleased to hear Apostolos say that only 75% of detentions in the United States result in 0 deficiencies. And I'll tell you why that's critical to me, because in my experience, and I spent 25 years as a practicing lawyer in the beautiful city of New Orleans. It's not just the birthplace of jazz and excellent food and, of course, good times, but I believe it's one of the most experienced and vigilant Coast Guard units in the United States. The experience that those gentlemen have, no matter how young they are, they really know what they're doing. And I say that because I have lived it numerous occasions. So when I go on board, or when people tell me that, oh, no, everything is correct, Mr. Tadros, my old record book has everything in there, I'll show you. Well, the Coast Guard has 5 other means of finding out of if what is written there is correct or not. And I promise you, when they say there is a problem, 9 out of 10, there is a problem. In my experience, only once was I able to determine that there really wasn't a problem. It was something fabricated by a disgruntled crew member. So the oil record book is only one example of a document on board a vessel that can be fudged with, that would create problems. Here are some of the red flags, and if there's a takeaway for you from today, there will be 2 of them. The most important thing, and it's something that Mr. Meidani said earlier this morning, we have to change our culture. That is critical, okay? Number 1. Number 2, we have to know that when we're going to the United States, there's gonna be rigorous Coast Guard investigations. So take precautions before you go. Make sure that all the systems and procedures of the company are followed, okay? One of the top red flags for me through my career was disgruntled crew. 9 out of 10, a disgruntled crew member will become a whistleblower. Post-construction changes to critical piping and connections. That's a red flag. Even the most greenest Coast Guard person will go on board and identify something like that. Hidden pipes or bypass waste treatment systems, all red flags. Missing paint coating, unlocked valves, all red flags. In today's day and age where we talk about, well, we have security and we have all the precautions that are taken, don't be fooled. Unless somebody from the company attends on a regular basis these vessels, until we change the culture of seamen, there's still going to be problems. In fact, here we are 10 years later, and they still continue to happen. Unusual fuel or sludge water practices, another red flag. I don't want to bore you with the legal side of it because I'm fairly certain you've probably heard it from numerous attorneys from the United States, but just very briefly, the Act to Prevent Pollution from Ships, or APS, is the United States equivalent of MARPOL. That is the act under which the Coast Guard acts, and they have broad discretion in how they administer the act. What is staggering here, and I'm certain you have all read about the millions of dollars in fines that have been given out by the United States courts. For example, in this very recent case that I was referring to you about, where it involved an air emission, okay? An air emission in California. The agreement was, there was a plea agreement for $500,000. And the United States District Court judge said, no, gentlemen, that's not good enough. So I'm going to penalize him $1.5 million, okay? And the judges have that discretion. So the law, and unfortunately, over the last 10 years, and I'm hesitant to say this, but I truly believe that the way the United States has been handling these cases is only going to get worse. It's only going to turn to other avenues. Another significant legal provision is the Sarbanes-Oxley Act that has to do with anti-shredding, which means destruction of evidence, okay? That one also applies because in the United States, every time there is a violation, it's another potential charge. So you may have lied, that's a charge. You may have destroyed a document, that's a charge. You may have tried to deceive the Coast Guard officer, that's a separate charge, and they just keep on mounting. And that, the third one that's applicable would be the False Statements Act. And that is the core of changing the culture. For the life of me, I cannot understand over the years why crew members believe that they can outsmart or fool the United States Coast Guard. One of my colleagues yesterday used a great analogy. So I grew up here in Athens. This is where I learned how to drive. I go to the United States, and in the United States, I have to drive by the rules, because if I park in a no park zone, or if I go through a red light, I can promise you I'm going to be pulled over, ticketed, and there will be consequences, okay? I come back to Greece and I drive the way I learned how to drive, which was park anywhere and go as fast as I want. Well, you have to know that, at least in the United States, and I'm not going to touch on any other countries, you have to play by their rules. There's no other way about it, okay? And the only way to do that is to change the culture. I put up some case studies because that's what really gets to me. So many times I've had chief engineers, captains, who will try and fool me, and I'm supposed to be on the owner's side at the time. So in this particular case, the chief engineer and the second engineer bypassed oily waste through a sewage system, and the chief engineer made certain false entries in the oil record book. He of course, thought he was going to outsmart the Coast Guard, so he lied to them not only once, but 5 different times. His story changed. Each time was a different charge. And worst of all, he took his lower personnel and brought him to his cabin and told them, this is what you're going to say to the United States Coast Guard. He took his third and second officers, engineers, and gave them a piece of paper of what they're going to say to the Coast Guard, okay? So he basically manipulated his crew. He destroyed the engine cadet's informal sounding and thought that he had done all that, to use a Greek word, imemagas. I'm going to get away with it. The Coast Guard's never going to get me. Okay, well, he was sentenced to 5 years in jail because the Coast Guard got to the bottom of it at the end of the day. Same type of scenario. It's almost like a broken record. Same type of things happen. And what I don't understand and have never understood is why? Why do they need to do this? Because based on all the speakers we've heard and everything that I have seen, our industry is making fantastic strides to improve safety, to improve mechanization, everything in how the ships operate. So why do they have to do this? It's cultural. And I'm going to leave you with this thought. I had one chief engineer say to me, that's how I've always done it. Ladies and gentlemen, I think my time is up. Thank you. It was a pleasure.